Hi, I'm Lacey. At my sister's wedding, my parents laughed at my fiancé, called him imaginary, said I made him up just to feel important. They even tried to keep me out of the family photo. But the moment that car pulled in, a Rolls-Royce, black as truth, everything changed. Still, the worst part wasn't the insult. It was the years before, the small silences, the backhanded jokes, the way they always made me feel like I had to earn space at my own table. Why did they need to erase me so badly? And what happens when you stop letting them? The Arizona sun hadn't even fully cleared the low rooftops when I pulled into the estate's driveway, rental car tires crunching against the gravel. It was Thursday morning, 2 days before the wedding, and everything around me felt too polished, like it had been edited before I arrived. People were already in motion, darting from tent to tent, clipboard in hand, earbuds in, smiles stretched just enough to look real. No one stopped to greet me. I stepped out, smoothing the front of my linen dress, and walked toward the main entrance where a huge floral arch wrapped around a wooden easel. It held a printed layout of the weekend: Friday welcome dinner, Saturday ceremony, Sunday farewell brunch, names and times neatly arranged in soft blush fonts. My eyes scanned quickly. Shannon, maid of honor, Claire. Bridesmaids, Naomi, Priya, Zoe. Family procession. Mom escorted by Uncle Brian. Nothing. No Lacey, not even a vague title like family guest speaker or readings. I wasn't just left out. I'd been edited out. I stood there for a long second, pretending to study the brunch menu printed next to the schedule. Inside, my stomach curled in the way it always did before I stepped into a room full of people who used to love me out loud. In the living room, cousins were unboxing coordinated floral robes, squealing about monograms and facials. I slipped in and smiled, but no one made space for me on the couch. Claire, the new maid of honor, gave me a hey that was just a tone higher than polite. Shannon floated in behind her, hair perfectly coiled, barefoot, holding a green juice. "Lacey, you made it," she said, giving me a side hug. "You're staying at the Airbnb, right?" "The one near the lake? Yeah, just got in this morning." "Oh, perfect. That one's so cute, very... you." I hesitated before asking, "Do I need to come in for a dress fitting?" Her eyes flicked to Claire, then back to me with a practiced smile. "Oh, I figured you'd prefer to just relax and enjoy the weekend. The bridesmaid stuff is kinda hectic, and I know you're not big on pastels." That was it. No warning. No, "Hey, hope you're okay with this." Just cut out, like a background character whose name got trimmed from the script last minute. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Sure, no problem." And that was the moment I knew I hadn't been overlooked. I'd been excluded on purpose. And the worst part? They'd all agreed it was best not to tell me. I kept it together through the morning bustle. By noon, I found myself sitting across from my mother at a small cafe table on the estate's back patio. Her hair was done, full face of makeup already melting slightly in the heat. "So, big weekend," I offered, carefully. Aileen took a delicate sip from her chamomile tea. "Shannon's done such a beautiful job. Everything is just so elegant. Did you see the seating charts? Her eye for design really came through." I waited for her to mention my name not being on that chart. She didn't. Not once. "I noticed I'm not in the ceremony," I said, pretending it was a neutral observation. She blinked, waved her hand. "Oh, you know how these things go. Too many moving parts. And with your schedule, we figured you'd rather not be roped into all the chaos. You know how you are, always needing your space." I wanted to say, "No, you decided I don't belong here. You decided for me." But I didn't. I stirred my iced tea instead, watching the lemon wedge spin. I'd fought so hard for autonomy in my life, my job, my city, my choices. And here I was, once again sitting in front of the same woman who only respected my distance when it suited her convenience. That afternoon, I returned to the Airbnb alone. Kendrick had a work call and wouldn't fly in until Friday night. The house was quiet, tucked between desert trails and hills that glowed gold as the sun dropped lower in the sky. I walked around the small backyard after dinner, barefoot on the stone tiles. A string of Edison bulbs buzzed above my head. The silence was the kind I used to crave. But that night, it felt hollow. Memories came fast, uninvited. Shannon at 16, begging me to do her makeup for prom, her asking me to write poems for her high school boyfriends, us dancing in pajamas to old Destiny's Child CDs, and now I wasn't even bridesmaid material. That realization didn't shatter me. It just settled in the center of my chest, slow and firm like something that had always been there, but only now revealed its full shape. I leaned against the railing and let the desert air pass through me. I didn't cry. I'd done all my crying years ago when I finally understood what kind of family I was born into, one that celebrated proximity, not authenticity. They didn't erase me by accident. They erased me because I made them uncomfortable, because I refused to shrink. That night, as I climbed into bed alone and scrolled through the group texts lighting up my phone, photos of pastel robes, selfies in the bridal suite, I made myself a silent promise. I wouldn't fight for space where I wasn't wanted, but I also wouldn't disappear. Morning arrived too fast. The sun was already heating up the patio tiles outside by the time I zipped up my dress and headed back to the estate for the family brunch. I didn't sleep much. My phone was full of wedding prep photos, pastel filters, toasts, champagne flutes clinking midair, but not a single one included me. Kendrick was in meetings across town. He'd land back in Scottsdale later that evening. I told him I'd be fine. At the brunch, the atmosphere felt curated. Coordinated floral centerpieces, perfectly folded cloth napkins, a customized sign that read, "Brunch with the Bride." I walked in and scanned the tables. Shannon and the bridal party were at the main family table near the front windows, laughing, sipping mimosas. My name card was nowhere near theirs. Instead, I found mine wedged between two distant cousins I barely remembered, one of whom was already deep in a conversation about fantasy football. I sat down and smiled politely, nodding through a story I wasn't part of. Out of habit, I reached for the pitcher of orange juice near the mimosa bar. As I poured, I overheard my mother's voice behind me, light, amused, not trying to be discreet. "She says he's in aviation," Aileen said. "But who even knows what that means anymore?" Judith responded, a bit louder. "I swear, at this point I think she just pulls pictures from Pinterest and says, 'That's him.'" They burst out laughing. I didn't turn around. I didn't confront them. My hand tightened around the glass stem just enough to steady it. I lifted it slowly and walked back to my table, careful not to spill anything. They were talking about Kendrick, about the man I had built a life with, the one who sent flowers to my mother on her birthday, even when she didn't reply, the one who respected the silences I didn't know how to fill with my family. And they reduced him to a punchline. Part of me wanted to believe they were just joking, that it wasn't personal. But the laughter said otherwise. It wasn't just casual mockery. It was targeted. It was meant to diminish, to chip away at what little space I'd carved out for myself in this tightly controlled narrative they'd all agreed on without me. A little while later, Shannon stood and clinked her fork against a glass. "Okay, everyone. Before we head to the spa, let's take some group shots for the wedding album." She gestured toward the staircase near the floral arch, where a photographer had already begun setting up. Everyone rose, buzzing with energy, shuffling toward the photo area. I followed, walking slowly behind them. Judith's voice again, this time aimed at Shannon. "You know, why don't we have Claire stand next to you instead of Lacey? It just makes more sense. Claire's getting married next, and she fits the palette better anyway." Shannon didn't flinch. "That's fine." No one disagreed, not even my mother. Claire smiled like it was a favor she hadn't asked for. I stood there for a moment, a few feet away from the forming group. A cousin called out, "Lacey, can you hold our phones?" So I did. That was my role now. The photographer didn't ask me to step in. He just clicked away as they posed. Shannon beaming in the center, flanked by her bridal entourage, all soft pink and curated grace. Claire next to her, hand resting lightly on Shannon's shoulder like they'd been sisters all along. I smiled, because it's what you do. After the photo session, I made my way quietly toward the powder room down the hall. I closed the door and rested both hands on the sink's edge. The mirror was too clean, too honest. I stared at my own face, waiting for tears, but nothing came. My reflection looked calm, too calm. I reapplied my lipstick, blotted it with a tissue, fixed a strand of hair that had come loose. And then I stood there in silence, long enough to breathe, to decide. I would not ask why. I would not beg for space again. This wasn't an accident. It was strategy. Their silence wasn't clumsiness. It was choice. So I chose too. When I stepped back out, no one noticed I'd been gone. No one asked where I went, and I didn't offer. The sun had shifted across the estate, casting longer shadows on the ground. I walked back through the patio, past the mimosa table, past the chatter, past Judith's smug smile. I didn't stop. Let them keep their photos, their pastels, their curated brunch moments. I had something far less polished, but far more powerful: truth, and it was starting to sharpen inside me. After brunch, I didn't linger. I slipped out through the side patio, past the hibiscus hedge, and circled back toward the guest house where I was staying. My room was still cool and quiet, the curtains drawn just enough to soften the desert light pouring in. I kicked off my sandals and sat at the edge of the bed, hands resting on my knees. I stayed like that for a while, still, breathing. My body was present, but my thoughts were everywhere else. On the mimosa table, on my mother's laugh, on Claire's perfectly timed smile next to Shannon in that family photo. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. Right now, I was just tired of pretending it didn't sting. By late afternoon, people had started drifting toward the backyard again. There were wine bottles popping, Bluetooth speakers buzzing with old-school R&B, and the faint smell of grilling shrimp skewers wafting through the open kitchen doors. Casual mingling, that's what Shannon called it. A wind-down night before Saturday's big event. I took my time changing. Nothing too flashy, just a navy blouse and jeans. Clean, minimal, forgettable. I didn't want to be noticed. I just didn't want to be erased. The backyard had been strung with lights. Cousins filled the beanbag chairs. Uncles smoked cigars in the far corner, and someone passed around a tray of sangria in mason jars like it was still summer break. I found a seat near the fire pit, nodding politely at the group already there. Shannon was off talking to a florist on speakerphone. My mother was nowhere in sight. Colby, my younger brother, was holding court as usual. Animated, loud, surrounded by people who fed off his energy. At 26, he still carried himself like a frat boy who'd never left orientation week. Someone made a comment about long-distance relationships, and Colby seized it. "You guys seen that photo of Lacey and her fiancé? I swear it looks AI-generated," he chuckled, shaking his head, like one of those stock images you use for pitch decks. A few people laughed, tight, uncomfortable laughs, the kind people give when they don't know whether it's safe to stay silent. I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. I just stared into the fire, watching the flames distort. Brent was sitting 5 feet away and he didn't say a word. He didn't look at me. No one did. Colby's voice kept going, oblivious. I'm not saying he's fake. Just, I've never seen him. Ever. And we live in the same damn country. Andrea, an old family friend with too many cocktails in her, leaned in closer to me, her breath warm with cheap wine. "You know," she murmured, "I always figured you were more the independent forever type. Not judging. You just always had that vibe." I turned my head toward her, not saying a thing. Her smile wavered. "I just mean like, you never really needed anyone. That's all." It was meant to sound flattering, but it didn't. It felt like someone reaching into your ribcage and tapping on the one part you tried to keep untouched. I stood up without a word. Didn't excuse myself. Just walked away, through the laughter, past the firelight, down the stone path toward the main house. No one followed me. Inside, the hallway was dim. I slipped off my shoes again to quiet my steps, passing the framed family portraits lining the walls. Photos of Shannon at her college graduation, Colby in his football uniform, a family trip to Yosemite where my face was cut off by a shadow. I paused near the mirror in the hallway. My reflection stared back at me, worn but intact. I used to think I'd outgrown moments like this. That age would somehow soften the sting of being reduced to a side character in my own family. But pain doesn't disappear with time. It just finds smarter places to hide. A flicker of a memory surfaced. Shannon, age 10, wearing a paper tiara, holding a bouquet made of napkins. "You be the veil holder," she said, pushing a scarf into my hands. I was the backdrop to her fantasy even then. I leaned closer to the mirror. This face had been called dramatic, complicated, too intense, too closed off. Not soft enough, not compliant enough, not bride enough. I was tired of apologizing for existing in a way they couldn't mold. Back in my room, I changed into sleepwear and drew the curtains shut. The party was still going outside, but I'd already left that story behind. My silence wasn't surrender. It was preservation. Tomorrow, they'd shuffle me again, seat me wherever was most convenient, say things that sounded like compliments but weren't. But I wouldn't bend. I had already started building the kind of resilience they didn't recognize, the kind that didn't need their approval. The sun rose with all the drama my family seemed to save for themselves. Light poured in through the sheer curtains of my room, casting a golden blur across the sheets. It was the wedding day. Saturday. My sister's big day. And I was still just a name on the guest list, buried somewhere below the sponsors and gluten-free caterers. I got dressed slowly. No bridesmaids buzzing around. No last-minute makeup touch-ups. No laughter spilling from the hallway. Just me and the silence. The dress I chose was elegant. Slate blue, fitted at the waist, sleeves just long enough to look intentional. It was understated but solid, like armor that didn't shimmer. Outside, the venue was already alive. I could hear vendors shouting over one another, silverware clinking, distant music rehearsals fading in and out. When I arrived at the garden, the guests were gathering in clusters, plastic flutes of orange fizz in hand. The scent of peonies mixed with something sharper, probably my own resentment. Brent found me first. He smiled, a polite curve of the mouth, then leaned in. "You look nice," he said. "They're still finalizing the photo schedule. Shannon's with the planner." He didn't linger. A quick nod, then he was gone, folding himself back into the chaos. I walked past the bar and spotted it, the seating chart. A massive acrylic board with soft pink calligraphy. Tables were arranged in spirals, each one named after a place Shannon and Armin had visited together. Venice, Kyoto, Marrakesh. I scanned quickly. No Lacey at the family tables, not at Kyoto, not at Venice. It wasn't until I reached the lower right corner, near a column titled Overflow Guests, that I found it. Table 18, Lassie, a couple of cousins. An uncle who'd once fallen asleep mid-birthday toast. And someone named Eduardo, marked as +1 no meal pref. Table 18 was tucked near the fence line, across from the portable restroom trailers. A planner in a black headset caught my eye. "Hi, can I help you?" she chirped. I forced a smile. "Just checking if this is right." She looked at the board, then back at me. "Yep, table 18. It's a great spot. Lots of shade." I nodded and thanked her. Because that's what you do when they push you aside with a smile on their face. You don't scream. You don't flip the table. You inhale, nod, and take the insult like you were raised to. I walked to my table slowly, heels tapping against the flagstone. It really was near the edge, close enough to hear the restroom doors creak open and shut. I sat down and tried not to make eye contact with anyone. 10 minutes later, I was still alone at the table. That's when Sienna arrived. She was 21, maybe 22, all contour and crop tops. One of those cousins whose name barely made it onto the tree, but whose Instagram made her the star of every event. She flopped into the chair next to mine, drink already in hand. "Lacey, right? You look amazing." "Thanks." She leaned in, conspiratorial. "So, is he like your sugar daddy, or is it real? Either way, like, respect." I blinked. She grinned. "I mean, come on, you look so chill," and he's like, straight up James Bond energy. I set my glass down carefully. "He's the kind of man who shows up when it matters," I said flatly. Sienna blinked. "Okay," she said, dragging the syllables out like a child backing away from a firework. She spun her chair to another cousin and began gossiping about someone's bridesmaid shoes. Just like that, I became invisible again, but not before reclaiming the air between us. From my purse, my phone buzzed. Kendrick, parked around the corner. "Don't move." My fingers tightened around the device. I exhaled, a full, uninterrupted breath for the first time that morning. No tuxedos, no flower girls, no champagne toasts had made me feel grounded. But those 7 words? They anchored me. I placed the phone back into my clutch and straightened my shoulders. The planner was waving people toward the garden arch, calling for family rows to begin lining up. I didn't rush. I just stood there at table 18, behind the ferns and the filtered glances, waiting, not to make a scene, but for the moment they'd have no choice but to notice. I didn't need to check my phone again. He said he was 10 minutes away, and Kendrick had never once said something he didn't follow through on. So I waited, still, poised, as if the wedding music and flowery laughter around me weren't crushing in from all sides. They started herding guests toward the reception tent once the ceremony ended. The sun had dipped just enough to bathe everything in a soft orange glow. Picturesque, almost cinematic. But beneath the fairy lights and perfectly placed floral arches, I could feel something colder threading its way through. Not dread, not anger, just resolve. Inside, the reception hall was bright, polished, and loud. The tables were laid out in a grid around a small dance floor, the centerpieces rising like floral monuments to an illusion of unity. I found my seat again, still at table 18, still facing the back. It didn't matter. The DJ tapped the mic and announced it was time for toasts. First came Armin's best friend from med school, a charming, self-deprecating story about their residency years. Next was Shannon's college roommate, who opened with a joke about tequila and ended with a tearful, "You deserve the world." Then, Brent stood up. He looked the part, confident, rehearsed, every word smooth as granite. He spoke about family, about love being partnership and laughter. He thanked Armin for welcoming him into the family. He toasted to growth. He didn't say my name once. I sat still, glass in hand, not surprised, just clarified. As Brent sat back down, the DJ turned slightly to the right, scanning the crowd. A server, maybe acting on someone else's cue, or maybe just improvising, walked toward me and held out the mic. I didn't plan this, but I took it. I stood slowly, heels scraping the wooden floor just enough to draw a few heads. I cleared my throat and looked out at a sea of faces that didn't expect me to speak. "I won't keep you long," I said, voice steady. "It's a beautiful thing, watching two people celebrated so fully, so loudly, so freely." I paused. Not everyone gets that. Some people move through rooms where they're barely acknowledged, let alone celebrated. So, if you do get it, if you're lucky enough to be seen and heard and held in that kind of light, don't take it for granted. Silence. Not pin drop, not awkward, just held. Then the mic chirped, a soft pop, and I handed it back. I returned to my seat. Brent caught my eyes across the floor, briefly, and then he looked down. Just like that. That was the confirmation I didn't know I still needed. Brent wasn't silent because he didn't want to take sides. He was silent because it cost him nothing to let me take the hits. I sat back, feeling calm. Not triumphant. Not shaken. Just settled. Aileen's eyes flicked toward me for the briefest moment, then dropped to her napkin. Shannon was already sipping her champagne, chatting with someone across the table, like I hadn't just unwrapped every layer of their curated reality with 3 sentences and a pause. No one said anything to me, no one clapped. But they all heard it, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to follow it up. I didn't need to apologize for the way I shifted the air. I didn't need to soften the blow. Sometimes the sharpest thing you can do is be unmovable in the exact moment they expect you to shrink. The music picked back up. People returned to their plates, the clinking of glasses smoothing over the friction like icing over cracked porcelain. But the cracks were there, and I had no intention of gluing anything back together. The sound didn't crash in. It didn't scream or demand. It slid into the air like a slow wave, low and deliberate, curling at the edges of the music and chatter, just enough to turn heads, just enough to cut conversations in half and freeze forks halfway to lips. It wasn't feedback from the mic, and it wasn't the clatter of a spilled champagne glass. No one could pretend it was normal, because it wasn't. It was the purr of an engine that didn't belong. Not here, not in this curated, pastel-draped backyard wedding reception. A noise so polished, so out of sync with the hum of laughter and clink of cutlery, it felt like a warning. I didn't even need to look. The black Rolls-Royce glided up the estate's winding driveway like it had a deed to the place. Sleek and glassy, unapologetically pristine. It wasn't here for attention. It commanded attention. It passed under the balloon arch at the edge of the reception without flinching, its matte chrome trim catching the last of the sun as if it had arrived on cue. When it stopped, the air shifted, the doors opened with a quiet finality, and then he stepped out. Kendrick didn't rush. He didn't even glance around. He exited the car like he was stepping onto a stage he'd seen 1,000 times before. The tailored charcoal suit hugged his frame with surgical precision. No tie. Crisp white shirt unbuttoned just enough to hint at something sharper beneath the surface. Sunglasses still on, even as the sky dipped into gold and mauve. People stopped mid-sentence, mid-drink. Aileen, my mother, clutched her wineglass tighter. Brent's jaw tensed. My sister Shannon, in all her Pinterest glory, paused just long enough for the mask to slip. 1 second of stillness, enough to betray the nerves she'd tried to bury under blush makeup and borrowed diamonds. Kendrick walked past the gift table, past the hand-painted "Welcome to Forever" sign, past the photographers, past rows of white folding chairs dotted with sorority sisters in matching floral dresses. He didn't ask where to go. He didn't scan the crowd. He walked with purpose, with history, straight toward me. I didn't get up. I didn't plaster on a smile or pretend this was a coincidence. I just watched him move, slow and certain, like a man who already knew what was waiting for him. Did I miss the toast? He asked, leaning in just enough to brush a kiss against my temple. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. He sat beside me, one hand steady on the table, the other reaching for the water glass like he had all the time in the world. We stayed like that, still and silent, while the rest of the reception awkwardly resumed around us. Muffled chatter, an unsure laugh, a waiter pretending not to stare. Then Kendrick pulled his phone from his inner pocket, unlocked it, scrolled. I wasn't snooping, he said. The planner left her iPad open. I saw a message. I didn't move. It was from your mom, to Shannon. His voice, still low, dropped in temperature. She said, and I quote, "Don't let Lacey near the mic. Let someone else speak first and cut it if she insists." My throat went dry, but I said nothing. Kendrick wasn't just delivering news. He was delivering proof. They didn't forget you, he said. They made sure no one heard you. That hit harder than anything. I'd spent months gaslighting myself, wondering if maybe I was too sensitive, too reactive, too much. Kendrick had always played it cool, told me not to assume the worst. Not anymore. He looked at me, and I met his eyes. Not hurt, not broken, just clear. Ready. All this time, he said, I thought you were exaggerating. I thought maybe they were just careless. But this was deliberate. I nodded once, the smallest gesture. Not for him, just to steady myself. Then he stood. I'm going to make my rounds, he said, smoothing the edge of his jacket. Join me when you're ready. I watched him walk, straight-backed and calm, into the heart of the party. He approached Aileen first, and I saw the color drain from her face. Aileen, he said, offering a smile that wasn't quite warm. What a beautifully executed event. She mumbled something about hydrangeas and vendor delays. Kendrick nodded, as if he cared. Then came Shannon. Her smile faltered. Kendrick extended a hand, gracious and cold. Congratulations. Wishing you and Brent exactly the future you've earned. Brent moved to shake his hand, and Kendrick didn't take it. The silence that followed was surgical. You could feel the air ripple. The guests noticed. Heads turned. Whispers started, hesitant at first, then sharper. People glanced back at me, still seated at the edge of the lawn. No mic, no spotlight. Just me, watching everything fall into place. But something had shifted. I wasn't invisible anymore. The whisper they thought they buried had walked in on 4 wheels and left the doors wide open. No more pretending, no more shrinking, no more waiting for someone to hand me a voice. I had one, and I had Kendrick, who'd made sure everyone remembered it. And now, for the first time all day, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The laughter didn't sound like joy. It was the kind of laugh that curled at the edges, tight, rehearsed, too synchronized. It came from the back right corner of the reception tent, where the lights were dimmer and the wine glasses were fuller. I was halfway through a bite of cake when I caught the sound of my own voice. At first, it didn't register, just a faint audio clip, muffled under giggles and clinking silverware. But then I heard the words clearly. Me, 19 years old, speaking nervously at a college panel. I recognized the speech. I recognized the tremor in my voice. I remembered how proud I was to get up there that night, and now they were playing it like a blooper reel. I turned in my seat. A semicircle of women, Judith, two of my cousins, an aunt I barely spoke to, were gathered around a phone. One of them, mouth wide open in laughter, nudged the other. Judith wiped the corner of her eye dramatically. And she wanted to be a motivational speaker? Another chimed in. Poor thing, she sounded like she was about to pass out. I stood slowly, carrying my plate with me as if it were a shield. I walked over, pretending to refill my drink at the water station just beside them. That's when I saw the screen. Someone had dug up an old YouTube clip and shared it to the family group chat. It now had a laughing emoji reaction from my mother. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Their laughter spoke loud enough. I returned to my seat in silence. And that's when Claire started talking. Claire, the cousin with 2 degrees, a dermatologist husband, and a curated life on Instagram that practically begged for a sponsored deal, was sitting close enough for her words to land. My sister just got accepted into the fellowship at Mount Sinai, she said. And did you hear Becky opened her second clinic? There were murmurs of approval, raised glasses, fake surprise. Brent clapped. That's amazing. This family really does have something in the water. Shannon beamed, her arm linked through his like they were in a campaign photo. Then someone, not even sure who, maybe another aunt, chimed in. Well, I guess every family has one creative type. You know, the one with the Instagram ads and the independent projects. The table chuckled. No one even looked at me as they said it. Kendrick did. He was standing off to the side, hands in his pockets, watching. He didn't interrupt. He didn't storm over or call anyone out. He just locked eyes with me and waited for my cue. But I didn't give it. Because I wanted the performance to continue. I wanted every mask to drop, every role to be played. I needed them to show themselves in full daylight, without me having to say a thing. Another laugh shot across the table. That was enough. I folded my napkin slowly, set it beside my untouched dessert, and stood. My chair didn't scrape. My steps didn't rush. I didn't slam anything. I didn't excuse myself. I just left. Their laughter stumbled behind me like a wave breaking too late. A few glances followed. No one called out. Outside, the air had cooled. The string lights twinkled in the garden, still set up from the ceremony. I walked past the hedge archway and toward the lawn, the hem of my dress brushing dew-covered grass. It didn't matter what they said inside. Not anymore. I knew what they were doing. One last try to shrink me before the night ended. One last test to see if I'd fold. But I didn't. Not this time. I stood by the edge of the garden, heels sinking softly into the earth, and let the silence wash over me. I could still hear muffled music from the reception, voices raised in cheer, a new toast beginning. Let them have it. They'd spent years trying to edit me out of their picture, sculpt me into something quieter, prettier, more manageable. And I'd spent years trying to play along. But not tonight. Not ever again. The first snowfall had melted off the New York sidewalks by the time I stepped out of the car. Midtown bustled like it always did. Business suits, coffee cups, tired mothers, urgent strides. But tonight, all that noise faded behind the revolving doors of the Barclay Hotel, where a black and gold banner bore my name. Lacey Fowler, branding in the age of voice 2 weeks. That's all it had been since Arizona, but it felt like an entire lifetime had shifted in those 14 days. In the mirror of the hotel restroom, I looked at the reflection of a woman in a tailored white suit, heels grounded, eyes focused. I didn't check to see if my parents had arrived. They had received their invitation like everyone else, on thick cardstock, embossed in matte ink. You once asked if I was serious, the note had read. I'd like to show you what serious looks like. It wasn't a plea. It was a calendar entry. Their attendance wasn't needed, but I knew they'd come, not for me, for the need to verify if I'd really become the person I claimed to be. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers as I walked up the side aisle. Kendrick was already near the stage, talking quietly to the AV team. He looked up, gave a short nod. I didn't need more. Rows of chairs were filled. Colleagues, clients, People who had seen my work online and flown out to hear my voice in person. My voice. Not an apology. Not a plea for inclusion. Just presence. And then, in the front row, Aileen and Melvin. My mother's lips were pursed, her expression unreadable. My father wore his gray blazer that he always saved for events with potential. Neither of them smiled, but they didn't look away. That was enough. I stepped onto the stage. The mic was already live, the lights warm but not blinding. "Good evening," I said, calm and deliberate. "I want to talk to you about building something when no one believes you can. I want to talk about starting from a place of invisibility and making that the very reason people can't forget you." I didn't mention Arizona. I didn't speak of my family. But every syllable was a quiet excavation of everything I hadn't been allowed to say for years. People leaned forward, phones came out, notes were taken. But I kept my gaze above them, above the rows, above the noise. I wasn't speaking for approval anymore. When the applause came, it wasn't deafening. It was deep, affirming, the kind that stayed with you long after the room emptied. Later, on the rooftop, the air turned cool and sharp. Aileen approached Kendrick first. "Thank you," she said, tone clipped, "for believing in her when we didn't." He tilted his head, expression unreadable. "She never needed belief," he said. "Just space." A pause. My mother looked at me, opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't apologize. And I didn't need her to. I just nodded, then turned away to greet someone from a brand agency who wanted to set up a meeting. At the end of the evening, as the last servers cleared empty flutes and half-eaten desserts, Melvin approached. His voice was low. "You've built something. I didn't see it before." I met his eyes. "No one did," I said. He didn't push, just nodded and walked off, jacket draped over his arm. And that was it. No grand reconciliation, no tears, no embrace. But in that moment, I realized my win didn't need an audience. It didn't need validation from the people who had once dismissed me. The point was never revenge. It was freedom. Freedom from shrinking, from needing to be smaller to fit someone else's version of a daughter. I stood alone on the rooftop, the city below glowing like a promise I'd finally kept to myself. The first time I watched the sea from our balcony in Dubai, it was silent. Not just outside, but inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't performing resilience. I was living it. It was late evening. The sky was cotton soft, blending lavender with deep coral, and the wind carried hints of salt and jasmine. I was barefoot, watering the herbs on the ledge, basil, mint, and a stubborn rosemary bush that refused to die no matter how many times I forgot it. Behind me, Kendrick was uncorking a bottle of red on the outdoor table. He set out 2 glasses, the clink barely rising above the hum of city lights below. "Funny how far you can travel just by stepping out of their version of your life," I murmured, not looking back. Kendrick didn't reply. He didn't need to. We didn't talk about Scottsdale anymore. Not in the way people relive wounds. If it came up, it was clinical, like referencing an old surgery scar. There was pain here once, we might say, but never again with apology. My phone buzzed inside. I left the watering can half full and walked in. The family group chat was still active. It had been unusually quiet since New York, but that night a message popped up. Aileen had shared a photo, me and Kendrick from the summit stage, the banner behind us crisp and clean. The caption read, "Look who made it into the family album." No exclamation marks, no emoji, but also no passive aggression, just inclusion. Seconds later, a friend request from Judith appeared on Facebook. I stared at it for a moment, not long enough to overthink. I didn't accept. I didn't decline. I let it sit. That was the difference now. I didn't have to respond to everything to feel whole. A knock at the door broke the moment. Kendrick answered. It was a courier, white-gloved, holding a padded envelope. Inside was Shannon's wedding album. I opened it slowly, flipping past spreads of bouquets, table settings, candid laughter frozen in time. I was in one photo, far in the background, blurred, no caption, no name. I closed the book and placed it on the bottom shelf of our living room bookcase, not out of spite, just so it could collect dust next to the cookbooks we never touched. Kendrick joined me out on the rooftop again, wine in hand. I think, I said slowly, That I'm finally done measuring what they didn't give me. He raised his glass. That's because you started measuring what you gave yourself. The moon was brighter than the stars that night. It hovered like a quiet witness over everything we'd left behind. They may never say sorry, I whispered. You didn't need it, Kendrick said. Not a question, just truth. I leaned into him, not because I was tired, not because I needed holding, but because we were finally standing on solid ground, together. The city pulsed below. The wind cooled the edges of my skin. I didn't crave applause. I didn't need the last word. I had made peace with the echo. And this wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. There was a time I honestly believed that if I just worked hard enough at being agreeable, if I smiled when it hurt, kept quiet when I wanted to scream, made myself smaller every time I entered the room, then maybe, just maybe, they'd finally make space for me. Let me in. Let me belong. But here's what I've learned the hard way. You don't need to keep trying to earn a place in a room that was designed to erase you. You don't need to fold yourself into a version they'll accept. Some spaces were never built for your voice, and that's not your failure. That's their limitation. You have the power to build something better, to take up space, to be loud, bold, clear, to write your own story, not wait around hoping to be written into someone else's version of it. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, or like every room you step into expects you to shrink just to keep the peace, this is for you. Stop apologizing for existing. You don't have to be palatable to be valid. You don't have to make yourself small to be accepted. You are not a footnote. You're the whole story. And your voice? It's not too much. It's exactly right. So if this story hit home, if it made you feel seen even for a second, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're tuning in from. I want to know who's out there because I know I'm not the only one who's been through this. And if this story rubbed you the wrong way, if it challenged you or made you uncomfortable, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to talk. Let's open up that conversation. And if you want more stories like this, real, unfiltered, no makeup on the truth, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. This space, it's for us. It's for the people rewriting the rules. You matter. Your voice matters. Your story isn't over. It's just getting started. See you in the next one.